Buying a rental property. Boy, do we have a lot to talk about today. Okay, so let's get started. So this has been a question that has been coming to me a ton of times. Like, oh my God, I found this house. It's so cheap. I'm so excited. I'm going to buy it and rent it out and make a ton of money. And so we talk about that. And so with all the ton of questions that I'm answering, I thought I need to do a video about this and get the word out on what is a different way of looking at buying rentals and things that you need to consider when buying a rental property. So the first thing is, how much money do you have? Do you have enough for different things? So let's kind of talk through it a little bit. Well, for one, this person comes to me and says, oh my God, I found this amazing rental. I'm going to buy it and rent it out. Okay, so question number one is, how much money do you have saved? Well, I have $15,000. I have enough for the down payment. So these are different things that you have to think about in addition to the down payment. Yes, you will need a down payment. And if you're buying as an investment property, you're going to minimally want to put 20% down. I advise oftentimes 25% down because it gives you a better interest rate and less closing costs, but that's another time conversation. So minimally, you'll need 20% down. But then there's also closing costs and things like taxes, insurance, etc. So you have down payment and closing costs. What about things like reserves? What are reserves? Well, for one, what happens if the house gets damaged, breaks down, you have no rents for a few months? You need to have money left in the bank called reserves, and the lender's going to require it too. Depending on how many rental properties you have, reserves you usually need between 2 months and 6 months of your complete payment, and that's with taxes and insurance, HOA dues if you have them, and of course the mortgage payment. So that times the number of months. So reserves. Then there's things like repairs, maintenance, lost rents. Oh my God, during COVID, it's like you should Google search New York, California, for God's sakes, Michigan, and see what the tenant-landlord rights were. So the landlord had very few rights during COVID. They didn't have the ability to sell their property if they lost their job. They could not sell a property from underneath a tenant if they were living in there because they couldn't displace them. And then what about lost rents? If a tenant chose not to pay rents, there was no eviction. Everything was put on moratorium and you couldn't kick your tenant out. Wow, what a nightmare. If you are living barely covering your cost or loss of job for yourself, how are you going to pay for somebody else's mortgage and the rentals that you have and covering the cost for that? So, reserves. You definitely want to have extra money in addition to your down payment left in the bank. I use a rule for myself because I have rental properties of $10,000 per property. I want to make sure that, God forbid, if something were to happen, and they do happen, life happens, right? If it happens to your house, if you have a water tank going bad, if you have a need for a new roof, it's going to happen eventually to your rental property. These things are bound to happen. I know that I had a house that I owned in Sterling Heights, and I moved out of that house and turned it into a rental property. No sooner than I moved out that they had water in the basement coming up from the sewer lines, and I'm like, oh my God, like, how does this happen? And so I had to repair and fix, and I didn't use insurance for it because I didn't want my insurance rates to go out, but it was like a $5,000-$10,000 expense. And thank God that I have reserves, or I had money set aside for issues like this. So I know you're getting a lot of videos and you're inundated with probably 20 of other videos that say buy rentals now and get rich quick. And who doesn't want to build a real estate portfolio, right? I get it. You're trying to think about your retirement and thinking about how, okay, if I get this rental and the tenant pays it off, when I get into retirement, I'm going to have this free and clear income stream of money coming in. And that's all great, but you have to get to the point of owning this rental, keeping it for the many years that it's going to take to pay off the property, and then dealing with everything that happens from point A to point Z in the way of loss of rents, property maintenance, and keeping the property in good standing till you get to retirement when the property is free and clear. So I get it. There's no one more than myself that I think that doesn't think about retirement all the time and think about, okay, how can I generate different streams of income, and having rental properties and paying them off and having those streams. But you definitely need to do things like the math on things. The math of what's this property going to rent for? What is the property going to give me a monthly rent? What happens if the property gets damaged? Do I have money to cover that? What happens if the tenant moves out? Do I have the ability to maintain payments until I find a new renter? And what happens, my God, if COVID hits or something weird and you can't evict your tenant and they're not paying and they're taking advantage of you and they're taking advantage of the system and not paying their monthly rents? Oh my God, who would think that that could happen? So these things do happen. They do. Proof of it is 2020, right? So rentals are a great thing. They can be an awesome thing. You just need to consider the cost and talk through it and write it out, like pro, con. Pro, income stream. Con, maintenance cost, repair cost. Pro, retirement income. Con, loss of rents when a tenant moves out. So you just kind of want to list it side by side. The other thing is, you think about those VRBOs and Airbnbs and having tons of money coming in, tons and tons of money coming in for a property that you can rent out at like a VRBO, that sort of thing. Well, you need to check with the city ordinances. Do they allow them? How many days throughout the year can you rent it out? And then you need to think about things like property management costs, cleaning costs, and different fees. So you definitely want to do like an income cost analysis, if that sounds like the right term to use, income cost analysis, and figure out, hey, this is the pros, this is the losses, and can I work with when it hits a rainy day? Because it will hit a rainy day. The Bible says rain falls on the godly and the ungodly. Rain happens. Crap happens, right? Oh my God. And then you're like, wow, how come this happened to me? It happens to all of us. We all get flat tires, right? We all get hot water tanks that go bad. But if you don't have money to cover it, then it becomes a catastrophe. And that's exactly what you want to avoid, a catastrophe. And how you avoid it is by having padded money for things that happen. I would say tenants are pretty good about 85% of the time. It's the 10 or 15% that can ruin you and sour you. And so that 10 or 15%, you want to do things like good credit checks, good background checks before you choose to rent to a tenant. But that is definitely part of like the research and discovery as you're deciding on which tenant would be best for you. Definitely calculating their income to how much they're renting for. You shouldn't rent for more than 30% of a person's income. And then thinking on things like what's their credit like, and what's not only their credit score, but what's their history like. And so looking through that will definitely give you a leg up when it comes to putting a good tenant in your property versus a person that is just going to ransack your house or have a girlfriend move in and be so angry with you that she kicks in walls and writes graffiti on the walls as she's moving out of the house. So you definitely don't want that. I have seen and heard stories about damaging to properties by girlfriends or boyfriends and costing $30,000 plus. I just heard a recent story of a husband kicking in doors, damaging walls, and damaging the property, and the wife is the one that's on the lease agreement. So she is going to be footing the bill and dealing with the landlord on that issue. So rain falls on the just and the unjust. You want to be ready when it does happen. I know this is a long video, but I got to counteract all the stuff you're hearing and watching and reading about get into investment properties and get into investment properties now. They can be a good thing. You just have to consider the cost. This is Dawn Connors. Thanks for watching, and please like my video, reach out, share, ask questions, thumbs up, thumbs down. I'd love to hear your feedback.